Hello and welcome to another episode of the Total Clarity Podcast. I'm Mike Varley.
I'm Jessie Hyatt.
And this week is week 3 of our first month in Manhattan. And we are in downtown Manhattan. And we have with us a native downtown New Yorker, Alexa Strautmanis, home from SoHo, which is not the most usual of locations when you talk about people coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
So we're super excited to have her on and kind of pick her brain about what it was like to grow up there.
Happy to be here, guys. Thank you for having me. SoHo is a weird place to grow up in and then to be older and say, yeah, I'm from here, especially with such a large family. To set the ground, I can introduce myself as someone from SoHo. And my family, I grew up with my immediate family, and it was 9 of us under one roof with 1 bathroom and 1 water heater.
Wow.
We were fortunate enough to grow up in one of these original SoHo artists' lofts.
Yeah.
My grandpa on my paternal side was an abstract expressionist in the 70s, which is like what those buildings were used for back in the day.
Yeah.
And before that, it was an industrial neighborhood where I think it was a wool processing plant. Like, they didn't have sheep, but they took it from the sheep there and then they processed it into yarn.
Cool.
Which ties in with the textiles.
We could talk about that at some point.
Yeah, there's already 3 threads here.
Yeah.
We can go down. I want to talk
Threads.
Perfect. I want to talk about your grandfather, though, because we've talked about him previously, and he's kind of a big deal. I mean,
I've heard,
yeah. Tell us a little bit about how you learned of all of that.
So my grandfather, his name is Alexa Strautmanis. Mm-hmm. He is a Latvian immigrant who came here from Latvia with my grandmother, and he started his career in Chicago, and he taught at the Art Institute in Chicago, but then around, I think, the time of the 70s, caught wind of what was going on in New York City with abstract expressionism and was like, oh, I'm missing the scene, time to go out there. Not that he wasn't making his own waves in Chicago, where he was the art director of Playboy.
Oh, wow.
In its heyday, when people did read it for the articles. Definitely.
Yeah.
So he uplifted my grandma and my dad and my aunt and moved them to SoHo in, I want to say, the early or mid 70s.
Okay.
And that's where our family remains today. But my grandfather's work is huge action paintings, as they're called, and they're so large, and they're oils and they're abstracts. They did not make paintbrushes large enough for him, so in our archive in our family we have old mops and like rakes that he would literally like slam down and move around on the canvas on the floor or on the wall if that was his method for that one. And they're just full of like huge smatterings of every color of paint. Some are more structural. He had a skull period, as every artist does.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
wow.
you know, haystacks for some, but like it's New York, so it's skulls.
Right.
But yeah, so we just had a retrospective of his art last summer in his native country in, not Riga, it was, I'll get you the name of the city, but it was a very small town in like rural Latvia, where there was this huge retrospective, and there's like a resurgence of interest in his art, even though he passed away in the early 90s, which is what led to us having the loft available to move into, because it was a lot of square footage for my grandmother to have on her own.
Yeah.
She was an accountant. She wasn't doing large scale oil paintings, so she was like, oh, you want to move your family of 8 into here? Sure. There's space for that.
Right.
So where were you before that?
So before, I moved into New York City when I was in 3rd grade.
Okay.
So when I say I'm from here, this is all I know and all I remember. But prior to that, we moved 4 different times before I was in 3rd grade.
Wow.
So I was born in Canada, dual citizenship.
Sick.
Line up, everyone.
Seriously.
And Supino's like, how do I get on that already?
Well, you got married, so that's
right.
How,
so
right?
now
Isn't
we have to go to Canada and get him a passport.
Yeah.
But essentially, we were in Canada, and my dad was in sales at the time, so his job kept moving us around, and like it was a growing family. Like my mom had 6 children, so at the time it was me and a few of my brothers and sisters, and we moved slowly, kind of down south from Canada. We moved to Albany, and then we moved to a town near there, like called Ravenna, and then from there we moved to, I think there was one other spot in between. And then we landed in New York, and I started the 3rd grade at a school in the village.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's kind of how, and so that must have been in like early or mid 90s that was. Yeah.
Did you have a lot of time to spend with your grandfather before he passed away?
I didn't have a ton of time. I was very young, but I was old enough in my siblings that I'm the one that kind of remembers him. He was exactly what you would imagine an Eastern European painter to be like, where it was like smoking like a chimney, drinking like a fish, cursing like a sailor, and having like really off-color, unsafe pranks and jokes, like not suitable for kids or any people. Like in these old buildings, there's huge staircases that just go to the top floor. It's just one big giant situation that you can fall down like Exorcist style. Wow. So we were on the second floor, which is the first one, but still high.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, one of my memories is like running up the stairs, because in Albany, we'd come visit my grandparents on the weekend, and we'd run up the stairs so excited, only to have my grandfather and his glass eye pop out of the door and like scare us to the point of us almost falling down these 2 steep steps of stairs, like all the way.
Oh my gosh.
He was a character.
Yeah, he sounds fun.
I'm sure he kept like his marriage very interesting.
Yeah.
And he would always host people at the house, like fellow artists. So on the wall of the bedroom that I grew up in is like an original Basquiat, because he used to hang out there doing, I don't know, what do you what do you do in a place in Soho in the 70s while you graffiti on the wall? I don't know, something, of moral standing. But yeah, so there was always like parties and hosting guests, and like they would go to all of these really old school New York places in the area and like in the neighborhood. And everyone who's really old who still lives in Soho all know each other, because that was the clique back then, was just like anyone who's been grandfathered in literally to these buildings are all aware of each other, because Soho is a small place and there's so much going on in there, and it's like the European destination because it's so photogenic and it just looks beautiful with the cobblestones, but when you break it down, it's like a bunch of old people holding on to their square footage.
Right.
Like essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
So did he parlay what he was making from the Playboy gig into purchasing that location? Is that?
So we never purchased it. It's still rent controlled from the 70s. That's how we're able to be there. We don't own property. We're just very blessed with like the lease laws here.
Amazing.
Everyone we knew has been bought out, but yeah, it was never a money move. And Soho back in the day was not safe. Like it was not a destination to live in. And actually the second floor places were the penthouses because there was no elevator. So to live on the top floor is like losers.
Because it's walk up
to walk up only. And then the ceilings get shallower as you get higher in these old buildings.
Oh, really?
I don't know the reason for that, but like second floor has the highest ceilings and then it gets smaller as you go higher.
Huh. Weird.
Yeah.
So it's a bold move by him to go from like a really stable, successful as far as what it means to be a successful job to like, no, I'm going into paintings now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. He was 100%, I would imagine, just following his passions. Yeah. I'm sure my reserved grandmother, the accountant, was like, oh, I'm totally on board with this decision. But she had a great career here, and he just wanted to be on the scene and to be seen and to create what he wanted in the city that never slept. Yeah. And he did that.
Wow. That's I feel like that story is the New York story. Like that's what brings people here still now.
Yeah.
And it's not the same as it was in the 70s, but it still has like vibrancy and creative people, and even the fact that like your family can still be living there because it's rent controlled and you come from this creative place. That's totally like why people are here.
Yeah, it's absolutely a mecca still.
Yeah. What was there any major turning point or like any major changes that you remember in Soho, or like what was it like when you first moved here? I guess is a better question.
I mean, moving here as a child, I would imagine, is very different than moving here as an adult. But as a kid, it was like, I was familiar with the area because we visited my grandparents a lot, but it was just like amazing. Like it was awesome. Like everything was at our fingertips. We knew the other kids in Soho because like, again, it's such a small place that everyone in your age bracket you kind of know. Even if you don't know them by name, you know who they are and they know who you are and what street you're on. So everyone was around. Every single subway station, like every train goes to Soho. Like there's not a train that you can't take to downtown. So it was always great to have friends over and to have a space large enough to host friends. growing up in the city, a lot of families are only children, like a lot of them, like I think more than people realize. So going to like my friends' smaller places where maybe there wasn't food in the fridge because they eat out all the time. Like my house was like the fridge that was stocked, and like everyone come over and we have a 10-seat couch because like that's my family's situation, is we're that many people. But downtown was just always vibrant, and it was always exciting, and especially going like outside of kind of your borders, like as the radius around your house increases that you're allowed to go on your own, that's when it really starts to get exciting, when you like gain this independence, which I guess in other towns and cities is like getting your driver's license, but it's here, it's like I can take the subway by myself.
Right.
Where can I go? Oh, anywhere I want.
Wow.
Amazing. Probably farther than I should have gone.
Do you have a memory of like a first independent subway trip that was like that?
Oh, I totally got lost. I got lost on like my first day of middle school.
Really?
Yeah, I went to middle school in Chelsea.
Okay.
And from SoHo to Chelsea, it's like not that far.
Shouldn't be.
But I got to school okay.
Okay.
And then I was leaving school, and I knew I had to get on the blue trains, but I wasn't sure which of the trains and which side of the platform, so I just got on one, and I went too far, and I remember hearing 34, and I was like, those numbers are too high, I went the wrong way.
No.
And I get out, and I'm near Madison Square Garden, and what was it? I was in 6th grade. So you see 6th graders, they're really small.
Yeah, they're little.
And I was just there at Madison Square Garden alone, like, what do I do now? And I just kind of got scared and like kind of sat down, kind of cried, just like, we're gonna figure this out, we'll do it together. And then my best friend's older brother walked by and sees me there sobbing. And he's older, he's a teenager. He's like, Alexa? I'm like, yeah, I got lost. He's like, okay, well, I'm gonna stay with you till your parents come or something. I was like, no, because it's embarrassing. It's like your friend's older brother, they're cool.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'll be okay. And like posturing like I was fine. I was like, I'm so glad Ian found me. Like, that was amazing.
Did he help you get home?
He did. I called my dad on a payphone, who was just like, if you went the other way, you'd be here, but I'll come get you, like dads do. And Ian was like, I'll stay with you till he comes, and he just sat with me. But like New York is such a small town in that way, where like if you're in a weird place, you're always going to run into someone. Yeah. It's just the nature of any town that you grow up in, where your whole well, we were kind of notorious because of how many of us there were.
Right.
But like people run into you, and like I'm running into people left and right in New York. Like it's just that kind of community here. But yeah, that was a memory that I'll always remember, because that was, I think, like the last time I got really lost on the train. And then it was like, okay, I understand how the trains work now. There's an uptown and a downtown.
You have to have an experience like that. Most of us don't get to have that experience in 6th grade. Yeah. And but it's good that I feel like, my first getting lost experience, I ended up in Coney Island at 1 a.m.
That's so
and I
different.
had to figure that out, but I was also 19 or something, I was
still scary
capable.
Though. First being lost times are the scary,
Oh,
it's the same amount of fear because it's the same situation.
Totally, because you're like, I did something wrong and I don't know exactly what I did wrong and have to quickly figure it out.
Yeah, there's somebody crying at Madison Square Garden right now. Not sure what age there is.
Right?
Hopefully there's an older brother figure that's helping them. Probably not, but they'll figure it out.
But maybe.
Yeah, you would have figured it out too.
I would have figured it out, that's the thing, but like at the time I could follow the pieces because Ian was there.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So you've already mentioned 2 schools that you went, a school in the East Village. West Village.
Yeah.
And then the school that you went to in Chelsea.
Clinton.
And you told us off camera at some point that you went to LaGuardia as well.
Yeah, I went to the Fame School.
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about. Well, I'd like to know about all of them, honestly. But
sure. Well, let's start at the beginning. I went to the John Melser Charette School, which is known by PS3, and then even more informally was known as the Hippie School.
Oh.
And it was a really cool elementary school that, like, all the teachers would be called by their first names. This was in the 90s. A lot of our teachers were gay, I remember, and they would openly be talking about adopting a child or having a child, and like it was always something that we were around. And my teacher was Greek, so a lot of what we learned in like 3rd and 4th grade was like Aesop's fables, which like ended with like morals and were focused on morality. And like because he was Greek, we learned about a lot of Greek mythology. So like one of the very first big, you remember like the first big book that you read where you're looking at it like there's no way, and it was Homer's The Odyssey, and I was like obsessed with it. It was so interesting.
You read that
to me.
in elementary school?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Cool.
but it was a fascinating story. We got like the type of language that was digestible for children, but it was still a big book. And to this day, it's like I love that book so much. And now I live in a Greek neighborhood, so full circle there. And then middle school was Clinton. I think it was advertised as like a focus on writing and arts, which I knew I wanted to be in a creative field, at least in my schooling. And this was a weird New York situation where Clinton was a school on the top floor of a building of an elementary school. So it was a full-blown elementary school on its own, and then our school was the top floor. So our middle school had one of those too, and it was very much this system of like, in the staircase, I'd always wonder, am I gonna run into one of the others? Because you really don't talk to each other. And then I became one of the others. And if I saw a really little kid, it would be like, we'd see each other and just go the other way. Like, not that it was like anything was enforcing this, it was just like, we're in different schools.
Right.
Like one of us is wrong here. Yeah.
Right. So Clinton's where I got lost on the subway, but it's also where I learned the subway. And that was only a short 3 years, thank God. Middle school is not a fun time for anyone. If it is, get them on this podcast because I want to hear what this is about. And then so getting into LaGuardia, well, first to get into LaGuardia, it's a specialized high school. It's not private, you don't pay tuition, but there are exams that you have to take in your chosen field of what you want to major in. So even for a high school, you're taking a major and you're taking specialized courses for that. So I wanted to major in art, and the test involved taking your portfolio, which is whatever art you want to show off. It can be in any format. I tried to do as many mediums as I could in terms of drawing and painting, like charcoal, watercolor, pencil, like anything flat on paper I was good at, but no sculptures really. And then the test itself, I will also always remember because I think I had really, really bad pink eye that was disgusting to the point that I had to wear an eye patch.
Oh no!
And we had, of course, in my art exam to draw from observation, and I was just like,
oh no!
And got in. So I was like, this is amazing.
Well, you had like compelling points. You were like, ooh, the eye patch girl.
Right?
So dangerous.
Right.
She needs to go here.
You know, when you're trying to find perspective and you close one eye, you're just like always looking in that perspective.
Yep. So maybe it was an advantage. I don't know. Like eye patch, take them to the art test, try out.
Yeah.
There were other majors that you could try out for. The majors, as far as I remember, were art was the majority of the school, followed by music, and so instrumental, singing, vocal majors, acting, drama majors, dance, like ballet dancers, and then theater tech was the very underdog minority of majors, was people learning theater tech in 9th grade.
Oh my gosh.
I wonder where they are now.
That's so funny.
They're still there.
They're wearing black behind stage somewhere unseen. Nobody knows where they are if they're good at their job. So yeah, going to LaGuardia was such an amazing place because everyone was passionate about something. Like this was a school that you had to specifically try out for. So even if like all schools have cliques and like, you know, sometimes you feel like an introvert and like you don't have a lot of friends because you don't have anything in common, you're put in a group where you have everything in common with everyone around you. But that being said, I got into like a really cool group of friends where it was a bunch of different types of majors. It was mostly art, music, and vocals. Drama was their own clique, and dance kind of hung out with the other dancers because like what am I going to talk about with a dancer? I don't know. Like it's not, at least at the time it was, they all ate lunch together. Right. So that's who got close.
It seems like when people are doing like something physical like that together too, it puts them in their own little camp. Like it's not just that you're speaking and like your language is different, but like the way that you're moving yourself around or something, like it makes me uncomfortable sometimes to be around someone that's a dancer.
That's how I feel about actors.
But
with like drama majors, it was always like, you know, let me explain, and then they'd get up and like do it. It's like okay, I get it.
And as you get older, you can like appreciate those things as like characters. But when you're a teenager, you're like, I don't know. Am I supposed to do that? I don't want to do that.
That's different. So, but it was a great school, and like it really hones in on like different types of art. Like I was doing nude figure drawing. Like I was drawing nude people. in 10th grade.
Wow.
You know, and like we had to take it seriously because it was serious. But it was jarring. Like the first time you go to class and at 10 a.m. it's like boobs. It's like, okay, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then like the male model comes in and you're like, all right. Like, okay, there it is.
Right.
And it's just like, this is what I literally tested and hoped to get into.
Right.
So I did a lot of that in college afterwards. Was like, I really leaned into it.
What was the student reaction to that? Like, was it giggling and, or
It's
not, I mean, not in the room,
giggling,
but or
it's
like after class?
Like after class. I mean, after class it would always be, I mean, I feel like the true like students who were looking at it as a craft is like, we all had our favorites. We all had like the models that we looked forward to. Larger women, we were like, it's gonna be a good day.
Yeah.
So much to draw, so many beautiful curves and lines and like stuff going on. If it was like a thin dude, it's like, what are we gonna do here for 3 hours with this guy? So like,
Yeah.
But like then there were the Snickers or something, or like sometimes someone would have something physically on them that maybe we hadn't seen as younger people and like not understand. Like some people would have bruises if maybe they were diabetic or something. So just like there's a lot physically that you're exposed to that you then unpack with your friends.
Right.
Yeah.
But nothing like really jarring or anything. Like it really, I appreciated seeing so many different types of people because the models were really like a reflection of the city. And then sometimes you'd see them on the subway. Like that would happen in college a lot because I went to college in the city at SVA and a School of Visual Arts. And like I would recognize my models sometimes, but not know where they were from.
Right.
Like, you know when you totally know you know someone and you're like, but where? And then they'll mention it and you're like, right. Got it, right. I remember it. But like, because you have your clothes on, I'm like, who are you?
Yeah, exactly. You're like,
can't
but I
do it
couldn't
all.
see your
You're
rear
weird ball.
end.
I remember you.
Right. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
except for this one woman who had pink hair, and I would always be like, that's her.
Was
But
she
like,
a bigger woman?
She was very small, but she was like a yogi, so she could get into
cool.
crazy poses that would be so fun to like work with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
lots of different body types, and like just that in a high school experience was like, I thought very cool.
That sounds
And,
really cool.
Yeah, like it was fun. Like we had pottery, I did photography, like I did etching and screen printing. Like I really had like an
Wow.
art immersion in LaGuardia. And it was just as immersive for the other majors. Like we would have essentially half of our entire day dedicated to these art fields, were a matter of what they were, and then still have to do like social studies, math, and history, and like the usual repertoire of high school classes, in addition to what essentially were like AP courses in art.
That's so cool.
The days were long. They were like
Yeah.
from 7:30 to 3:30 sometimes.
Wow.
They were full days.
Do you feel like because you were able to spend so much time doing what you loved, did it make you more or less, or like, I guess you don't really have anything to compare it to, but how did you feel about the other classes, like that basic STEM curriculum that you still had to take? Was it?
I didn't do well in math. Like math, if I could have dropped it entirely, I would have. But I did look forward to like social studies. I really loved because there's so much art in social studies. There's so like learning about artifacts and learning about like tapestries and different statues and like historical references. It's like that's all art history actually.
Yeah.
So it made me maybe more interested in them, but also like I feel like having so much art made me more interested in school in general. Whereas if it was just core curriculum, would I've been so eager to get to class like I was for my art classes, would I have cut class more?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your husband, our previous guest, Christopher Supino,
Yes.
we were talking to him about schools as well, and he was talking about the idea of, you know, getting your child into certain schools and the system that exists in New York that is both competitive and potentially unbalanced, certainly a system to navigate. Do you recall with your parents, you know, that having 6 children, do you recall it being a topic that was one of anxiety, or did they kind of like navigate that without you kids knowing? Like,
it was a lot. I know it was a lot to manage. Like I know that my mom would be the one making sure, essentially being a project manager in the family and making sure that all of the kids met their deadlines for applications and having their materials ready. But in terms of anxiety, like I don't think that any of us were ever like, oh, I didn't get into the school that I wanted to. Like my brother got into Stuyvesant and then to Bronx Science, which are very good schools, but he's very technically skilled at those things. So I think it was just a matter of, everything will work out as it works out, and my mom kind of having the blind faith that like the school that you get into will be fine.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a matter of how you apply yourself and like those types of things. But in terms of navigating the system, I'm sure it must have been stressful, but it's not any stress that was carried on to us. Preparing for my LaGuardia exam was like probably the most nerve-wracked I'd ever been as an 8th grader.
Yeah.
But it was also like exciting because this responsibility is like, it's the first time that it's being put on you. And like, even as a kid, you're being told like, what school do you want? And like an adult is asking you, what do you want to do at school? And then you have to really think about it for the first time, that it's kind of like a growing experience, even navigating the system and thinking about these choices and weighing them, where like in childhood, you never have to do that. You never have to cross-reference your pros and cons. And then
nice
here in the system you do.
Yeah. It sounds like your family really let you make that choice yourself too.
That's why I went to art school for college.
Yeah.
They really let me just make that choice.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What did you end up majoring in at SVA?
So I just went in under fine arts, and I really gravitated towards doing oil paintings. I did a lot of nude figure drawing because I just loved it so much. And then I kind of had like an unofficial minor, because we don't really have minors, but I just loved these projects and would gravitate towards them, was art criticism and like writing about art and finding like a language to communicate an artist's vision and communicating what their projects are, how it looks, how it feels to someone not looking at those pieces. I found like really interesting, and like leaning on my love of humanities and social studies with like communicating those types of things. But the art was mostly like large scale oils because they were just fun to do.
Wow.
And I always liked doing bigger pieces.
Do you have any of them still?
Yeah, I have most of them. They're at my parents' place with my grandfather's paintings.
Oh, wow.
That's where the paintings are stored.
We'll have to come look at them at some point.
Yeah,
I'd love to
absolutely.
see those.
I have like an ancient blog somewhere where they're up, because one of our assignments at SVA was like to create a blog. Like I think it was like for a psychology class or something, and I figured, oh, this is where my art paintings can go.
Yeah.
Like photos of them, so we can pull those up.
Yeah, I would love to see it.
Yeah.
Totally. So there was never a time that you lived outside of the city, right? So you just transitioned from SVA to here.
Yeah.
What were some of the first jobs or like what did it look like, the transition between schooling and living?
So growing up here, I like know the city like the back of my hand, and my mom actually ran an in-home daycare center after 9/11, which my father lost his job in. So that just, we scooped it up real quick. My mom knew what she was good at and started raising other people's kids. And then essentially it really grew into like this homegrown business that spread by word of mouth and became very popular with Manhattan parents who, like, if schools are hard to get into, daycares are harder to find.
Oh, yeah.
So at the time in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, like I was high school age, and I really she started kind of pimping us out to the parents as babysitters.
Oh,
because
wow.
like her care only extended till 6 p.m. After work, come get them. If you need evening or weekend care, take one of my many kids, essentially. So we just became the Babysitters Club, and I nannied for a long time because it's great work. You're outside, you're engaging with children, usually under the age of 5, which are kind of the easier ages if you're used to that, because it's less like critical thinking and like homework help and more about like Play-Doh and markers and Cheerios.
Right, like keeping them
And you
alive.
can do your homework while they nap, and you can use your resources of knowing the city to like entertain the kids in a stroller and like knowledge of the subway system. And it was an easy transition that I can do schoolwork and then I can nanny and babysit. So I really did the nannying thing for a while. It was decent income and it wasn't hard work, so it really just worked out. And I have, like, I can't even name how many families I've worked for. None of them were live-in, none of them were like travel with them, but I did some overnights, and I did work for a Shaolin monk who has a Kung Fu temple here downtown if it's still there, it's on Broadway. It's the Shaolin Temple USA. Ooh. And he, I forget the word for it, but he basically like abandoned his temple when his temple was touring America because he wanted to live here and to have the American dream. So he got himself to New York and founded the Shaolin Temple. And I remember going to that job interview, which was not through a reference of my mother's. And I walked it, I found it on Craigslist. It was downtown. It was 2 older children, but it meant more consistent work.
Yeah.
And I got to the address of the home, and it was this giant door with a dragon painted on it that said, "Please remove shoes before entering Shaolin Temple." And
wow.
I'm like, is this the place for the babysitting job. So I go in and there's people doing kung fu, like real, like spinning, flipping, kicking kung fu.
Whoa.
And I sit there with like a lot of Mandarin women, and I'm there like, this might not be my job. Like I'll apply, but I might not be the pick for this one. And I got to babysit these two awesome kids who were actually the godchildren of RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan, because their father is the one who taught them about kung fu.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh,
Yeah.
so cool.
So that's one of my work transitions.
Wow.
That's great. That's so great.
I like met Ghostface one time, like they came over, I was just like, okay, anyway, I have class and have to leave because it's like 3 a.m.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, so it's like stuff like that, creative parents, makeup artists, photographers, like just all these creative individuals who live in the city and are like, I'm choosing to live here for my passion, and I happen to have a kid.
Right.
So just like perpetuating that nature of like, who lives downtown? Oh, Shaolin monks.
Right.
Yeah.
And then from there it was like an artist assistant for a while, just working in a home as like a personal assistant with her archive and everything, kind of meandering around, figuring out what I wanted to do. And then I got a job at the Cooper Union, which is this great school downtown for artists, architects and engineers that I applied to for college but didn't get into. But then I got the job and it was like, well, I'm here now.
Well, it's funny because it's like you would have gone for free, but then they paid you to
Exactly.
be there. Even better.
The irony is not lost on me. And then from there, I've basically been in like nonprofit higher education, communications, and fundraising since then. And now I'm at Cambridge in America, so we represent the University of Cambridge in England. So just real quick career path there.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely, I feel like, a part of the New York story where you're often not going to end up doing the thing that you thought you were at the start, you know? If you're a hard worker, and there's just so many things to be stimulated by around here too, you know? That it's, it can vary so wildly.
Yeah, there's opportunities to grasp. Like you never know what it will be. And I feel like it's going to continue that way. And that's kind of why I never left. Like if I left here, where would that be? Like where would I be getting the same environments and people and situations and interactions? Like after this and growing up here, where do you go that's not kind of a downgrade in all those areas?
Unless you're looking for just something that is not any of that. Like unless you just want to be in the middle of nowhere alone.
Yeah, my sister just moved there. She loves it.
Really?
Yeah.
To the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, I don't even know
I know where that is.
Yeah.
It's not here.
It's all the photos she sends me have no buildings in them.
It's cheaper than South Nowhere, actually.
Oh,
the middle, yeah.
Middle nowhere is?
Yeah. I don't know why. I haven't been there, but.
So as we've been walking around this last week, we're coming from, our first week in the city was in Midtown, our second week was in Central Park, and now we're here downtown. And I don't know if you have anything to say about this concept, but basically Midtown feels very much just gridded, and Mike has sort of a nice thing that he's been saying about that I'm not going to try and paraphrase because I'll probably butcher it.
It's where my office is, so I think I'm going to understand.
Go ahead.
Oh, do you want me? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I said I'm not going to paraphrase it.
That was a segue. I was thinking this week about how in Midtown, you know, it's very gridded and formal, and we did a walk that was up and down each block. I think we maybe only do that one more time in the year, provided we make it that far.
Each block?
Yeah.
Okay.
First Avenue to 11th Avenue.
It's a lot of corners.
And 23rd to 59th. So
it was bizarre. Like it felt like this crazy time warp, and like, but it was very mindless.
Well, it was, yes. It takes out some of the navigation necessary in other areas. Similarly to the Central Park area, there's of course the natural middle, which is definitely a lot of pathfinding, but the edges, the Upper West Side, the Upper East Side, and everything in between, very up and down. And then you get to this week, and this has definitely felt like my favorite part of Manhattan so far, and also perhaps you got to beat Supino, yeah. And then also
keeps it spicy.
Yeah. Also, maybe one of the top favorite parts of the city, certainly because I worked down here for 6 years until recently, but also I was kind of thinking that there's this sort of feng shui or like urban planning golden rectangle thing where New York is uniquely advantaged by the fact that it is a conversation between the grid and then the natural city growth downtown, where you are spending a lot more time navigating areas, and your imagination can go with each turn that's happening, and the idea of there being this kind of like sluice way of capital that like it's a lot less thought that is taken up by having to navigate, so you can focus on whatever your task is, and it all goes down to where the downtown is, where there is people like your grandfather, where there is this kind of sense of ingenuity to the industry of uptown, and there's this kind of dance that happens that maybe you couldn't even necessarily plan in other cities. It would be inorganic, and if there was too much of one or too much of the other, it wouldn't be New York. That the grid is just too much of a authoritarian experience, and the downtown is like just too rambling.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, really well said.
Yeah.
Like the dichotomy is so apparent. Like I went from living downtown and working downtown to working in Midtown. Like I work in the Hippodrome building, which is literally next to Bryant Park. It's on 43rd and 6th Avenue, so square. And I miss the energy. I miss the dynamic of downtown. Like every time I would come meet Supino and you guys downtown by your office, I'd be like, I can't wait to get below Houston Street, where like things are a little more lax and like chill and beautiful and organic. And like the reason that downtown is split up in such a weird way is because of farmers. Is because when the city was being planned and like roads were being like mapped out, they would literally go from farm to farm and ask these farmers, who some of whom might have been illiterate, just like circle where your land is so we don't build a road through it. You do that with enough farms, and that's why you have all the triangles in the West Village that like aren't big enough for a building.
Because
it's just like little people were like, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, and then they're like, okay.
That's so cool. I had no idea that was why.
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of the reason why. I'm sure that like roads have been repaved, but the initial planning of like the village was just that, around a village of like people that had their land there.
Yeah, but it makes for such a nice walking experience too, because I mean, I moved to New York in 2008. I lived in the East Village. I went to school in, what do you even call it? Like, is Central Village, I guess Greenwich Village, like the one road, like 16th and 5th?
Yeah, I'd say that's the village.
That would be the village, but not east or west.
Not Greenwich and not east.
Right.
Just the.
Just the. But I would walk around the West Village a lot, and I still, even though it's been more than a decade, I do not know my way around. And I love that so much. I love just being able to like walk and get lost and come upon something that, oh my gosh, I think I've been here before. Or I feel like that probably spurs a lot of creativity for the people that lived here and still live here. And did you feel like when you were growing up, did you just like ever wander around and find yourself in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was also just like getting myself places. Like I had in elementary school, so really, really little, like 4th and 5th grade, I had to walk to school. And I had to walk from SoHo to the West Village to Christopher Street, like across 7th Avenue, like big walks for a little kid.
Yeah.
And this was like, 90s, where there would still be like condoms in the gutter and stuff. And like as a kid, you're like, what are all these disgusting balloons? Like, I don't know what these are. I know they're gross. But it's like stuff like that and the gay pride parade that would happen. And like I'd always watch it on TV or be there in person and be like, there's my school. All these like people on parade floats and like dressed so fancily are like right there.
So cool.
And like, yeah, it's, I mean, one big thing growing up downtown about like kind of walking around and being on your own for the first time and discovering new things was like going to Kim's Video, like near where St. Mark's Place was. And usually we'd like have the okay to hit the Blockbuster on Broadway, and that was where everybody was on Friday nights, and we'd go take the trek to Blockbuster, and then if they didn't have the movie we want, we all got permission, we could go all the way to Kim's Video over on like Avenue C or wherever it was. And it was like, that was a freaky walk as a kid to go through on a Friday night through St. Mark's Place to Kim's video was just like, so much is happening. I don't even understand what I'm seeing, but I know it's exciting.
Yeah.
And like none of these people's hair are normally those colors. And what's wrong with everyone's face? Because like everyone was so pierced. And it was just like, I was aware of it, and I always kind of, even as a kid, felt the sense of pride of like, yeah, downtown, look at you being weird, right? And it's just like, that's still the case, like when I visit like St. Mark's Place or something, and I see like Ian's, where I eventually would cut class and get something pierced. It's like, this is such a part of the city that you can be whatever and whoever you want downtown.
Yeah.
But if you walk around like that in Midtown, where my usual office is in these corporate grids, it's like you really stick out like a sore thumb. But then you see a guy in a suit on like Avenue D, and it's like, what's this narc doing here?
Totally. Did you, you said you got piercings on St. Mark's?
Yeah. I mean, as you do.
Yeah, that's where I got this.
Yeah, I got my tongue pierced there. No, I got my tongue pierced on 6th Avenue. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not anymore.
Was that your first, like?
No, oh my God, that would be diving in with both feet. I did a lot of these myself, but I had my cartilage done on St. Mark's at Whatever Tattoo and at Ian's. I had my lip pierced at Whatever Tattoo, which I kept a secret from my mom until I literally got accepted to college. And then she found out it wasn't fake because I tricked her. I kept a fake one on, and she'd be like, show me it's fake every now and then. It's like, it is. And then college orientation, she came with me and she's like, take it out. I'm like, I can't. Sorry, I'm in college now. And I just had a lip ring and a tongue ring that she still hadn't known about.
Did she ever find out about that?
I don't know how she would have, but at that point it's really out of her hands. Yeah. I think she knew I had one eventually, but yeah, that was uncomfortable.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
We were talking about fake IDs earlier today. Did you have a fake ID?
Of course.
Oh, great
Could you tell us about your first? You recall getting your first?
Sure, yeah. So you get fake IDs, or you did at the time in the Diamond District. And I knew someone who knew someone, and we went there like in the middle of the day, in an afternoon. I forget if it was like a half day or something, or if we cut. But you go in and they take your photo, but then they put it on an ID of like a made up person from a different state. And I think I made up a name because it was like, ooh, made up name. I don't know, because I didn't want my name on a fake ID, you know, if it was found.
Yeah.
So I forget my last name, but I think my first name was like Cadence, because I really liked how cool it sounded at the time. And yeah, I used that to go out. Like I would use it to go to Misshapes nightclub. I went to the Limelight and saw the New York Dolls, like when it was still going. Like I went to CBGB's. Like it was a necessity for me. Also, like in high school, I was dating someone like a little bit older, and I wanted to like go out with them. So like I needed this too as like a passport for dating.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really, I loved it, and I never like took it too far or like was trying to like aspire to be in any of these like really elite nightclubs. It was just like, where can we like drink PBRs till 4 a.m. and then walk home and then go to class? Like, so yeah, I loved having a fake ID. It did get taken away at one point, and then it was like, okay. And then I remember being 21 and getting my ID, and it's like, now I can go anywhere, and it's like, do I want to though? Like, it's so exhausting. Like, I'm never using that ID for that now, especially now.
Yeah. I remember going into a bar that I had been going into for 3 years with my fake ID for my 21st birthday.
Exactly. The beer garden's like that for me in Queens right now where I live, because I would always be there underage, and now like I'll still get carded, and it's like, oh man, like, okay, here it is, sir.
Yeah, there's something funny about, but like, do you remember handing the fake, like, were you always nervous?
A little bit. I was pretty cocky when I was younger, and I was always very tall, which really helped. Also, like the piercings and the purple hair,
that probably
like helped me
too.
But I'd say it's all attitude. Like if you hand it to them, like don't even waste my time with asking me questions about this. It's like sometimes you just get in. I think it depends on the group that you're with and like everyone's attitude as you approach the door. But with the ID itself, it's like the doorman just wants to take a look at something so his boss sees, and it's like, yeah, okay, go ahead. If you have ID, you have ID. You know, he's checking ID. There's an understanding.
I think that might be something that New Yorkers have a leg up on other people, or even people in cities in general, which is the concept that anybody that's in a position of nominal authority is really just looking to get through their day. They don't really care,
Yeah.
you know. I just had such a respect for authority growing up. I thought like, well, they're doing their job and they're going to defend that, you know, that whatever they're, and it's
They
like,
don't
no,
care.
nobody cares.
Especially if you're a girl and you're
Yeah.
like, I want to go to this club. It's like, okay, like
Yeah.
go ahead. If that's who we want in the club, go in.
Right.
Like, who cares how old you are? Not
Yeah.
okay, but like it was fun.
No, but that's how it is. That's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, a group of 3 girls and maybe 1 guy, and that's how we'd all get there. Is like we'd have to have enough girl friends to take our guy friends.
Do you remember what state it was from?
I want to say Arizona. I'm not
Oh.
sure. It definitely was nowhere I'd ever been.
Yeah.
Far enough away, exotic enough.
Yeah.
So you
Started
never,
with an A.
Did you ever get hassled? So one time I was not allowed in because I had one from Canada, and the bouncer started asking me questions about Canada. And
Right,
I was
because
like,
no one's from Canada.
like he was like, "What's the grocery store in your town?"
Was he Canadian?
I don't know. He didn't let me in. I didn't really
That's
get to talk to him.
weird.
Did anyone ever ask you like?
So weirdly, because I've never had a driver's license, when I even was of age, I had a passport card. And that's the card that you get with your passport as a state and federal ID in the card itself. And you can use it to travel to Mexico and Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Just plug for passport cards if you don't have a driver's license. So, but it like looks really weird. It's like got this weird holographic flag on it. Like it's very extra, and it doesn't look like any existing ID, let alone a New York State ID. So I've handed this accurate federal ID to bouncers before, and they're like, what is this? And I'm like, it's a passport card. And they're like, I've never seen this before. And it's like, I know, but it's federal. Can you check the back? And like
Yeah.
some won't let me into play.
Really?
Well, not anymore, but when I first got it when I was
Right,
21
when you
or
were a little
22,
younger.
it was like no one had them because they were new. But it's like, that's not even state, man. Like, that's the federal government.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, quit hassling me. If all my friends are like 25, why would they be trying to hang out with a 19-year-old?
That's like
just-
has this weird,
Right,
like,
like-
shitty fake ID.
So like the real ones have been hassled, but I mean, I'm sure that I was turned away from certain places, but then because you're in New York, it's just like, okay, what's this night gonna be now?
yeah, I'm like, well, let's go over there.
Let's
or
get some
something.
40s and ride the A train all night. Like, whatever.
We're going to Far Rockaway. Let's
We're
do
going
this.
to Forest Hills. Or something. Like, I spent time in Forest Hills. I don't know why it was so far away.
Yeah, as you got older and you were going to high school at LaGuardia, did you have more friends that were from different parts of the city?
Totally. Yeah, because kids from all over New York would try to get in. So that's when I really started hanging out in Brooklyn more, especially Park Slope. It hasn't changed, but that's always where the families have been.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, Yorkville is a place that I really hung out in a lot. That's like East 70s.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like very, very east side 70s, 60s, some lower 80s, but like Yorkville is its own neighborhood. It's like the not nice Upper East Side, essentially.
Right.
Like when you think of Upper East Side, Yorkville's not what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
And like Upper West Side, and like also just meeting kids from other high schools as you like go to parties and like you meet people that way, and you're like, oh, you're at Beacon, my brother goes there, and like, oh, you're at this school, and like I played them in volleyball last year, and like the public school system in New York is like, if you're within a certain age bracket, the ability to overlap with other kids is so huge in like all these different like environments, essentially.
Yeah. So if you had a friend visiting and they're just going to spend time in downtown for like 2 or 3 days, what are some of the hits? Where would you send them to?
I mean, it's weird because like once I moved out of here, and even when I was living here, like I didn't hang out in the places that were right next to my house. Like
Right.
the restaurants closest to my house, I'm like, what restaurants? Because like everything's so overpriced in SoHo and kind of always has been. But I do think that Green Street, the street I grew up on, is just beautiful. Like it really is stunning. It really looks like Europe. And just walking around SoHo as a historical district, which is not permitted to put in like neon signs or anything flashing, that it truly is like stuck in time in its facades. And that's like a vision of old New York. So highly recommend that. And then definitely just journeying to St. Mark's Place, because as much as things are changing around it, like it's still kind of gritty and gross and cool. And you can just have so many types of food there. Like any type of food under the sun you can find in like that part of the village. I love Washington Square Park just because it's so iconic, but then so peaceful at the same time, and then not peaceful at all at other times. So it's like a real toss up there. and Union Square and that area, just because it has been like so filmed. And that's really a place where if you don't know what you want to do with your day, if you just sit in Union Square long enough, like you'll figure it out. Like you will go on an adventure based on something you see there or hear there or catch a whiff of or see a farmer's market. Like that's just, it's wherever you want to go from that place. Specifically, let me think if there's anything that I would really vouch for downtown. I mean, I always liked walking to like Battery Park and stuff. Like that was kind of a far walk that was through a weird neighborhood, like financial district, where it's just like, just get through it. There's water at the end, and you just open because it's strange in that neighborhood. And because of 9/11, like I don't know about like anyone who grew up downtown is not like super psyched to go to that area, but then you're past it and then there's just like the view of the Statue of Liberty and like this fresh oceany air that you don't really get on either sides of the river, but downtown you like catch an ocean spray and it's like you just look out on the ocean and it's like that's lovely.
What was the park that passed under the bridges like when you were growing up, like the Williamsburg, Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges?
Parks?
Yeah, like that. Was that developed yet, or was it kind of?
I'm not sure. I don't really think I spent much time in that area because that was pretty far over. And even currently, that neighborhood hasn't really changed that much. That it can still be kind of unsafe at night. But I think that that's like where we would play soccer on the weekends with like our downtown league, is because there were sports fields there. So I think my sister, who was more into soccer and therefore a more serious player, her teams would play there, but I think I probably only just played a few games, but that wasn't really like a locale of my own. We did hold down Thompson Street Playground, which was a public park. It's since been renovated, but it used to have an above ground pool in the middle of SoHo. And that was so weird. And like not a SoHo house pool, like a really gross backyard style above ground pool that was public to the city. And me and all these neighborhood kids would go there, not kids from school, but kids who lived in the area. And it was this great generational situation of like kids my age, kids younger than me, and kids older than me that would all be together. So in that way, it always felt safe, even if it was just a few people there, because like the older kids would look out for the younger ones. And like no one's hassling the teenagers because they were like big guys who went to Francis Xavier High School. Like they played like lacrosse and stuff. Yeah.
But they all knew you. You were like the younger
kids.
siblings or something.
Yeah, the Strautmanis people were definitely known. There's too many. You couldn't not see us.
A hardy clan. Where or would your parents take all of you if you were to go out to eat? Like what was a family-friendly food
so
location?
that like never happened because it was so expensive. But there was this, it's not there anymore, but there was this amazing barbecue place on the corner of Wooster and Spring across the street from Chanel that is now a Crocs store, and it was called it was called Tennessee Mountain. And the streets of SoHo would smell like barbecue sauce because like it's a pretty empty neighborhood early in the morning and late at night because of the tourism, and it would smell like barbecue and smoked meat. And like once a year we'd go there and just splurge on like ribs and like chicken, and we'd all eat there, and that was one like big formal occasion. But we'd go to dim sum a lot because we can all just inhale shrimp dumplings for half an hour, and then the bill comes and it's like $24.
Right, and you have the big like circular tables.
So we could always be seated. It was always immediate, which when you're dealing with 6 children, it's like, feed them right now, please. And they would. The carts would just come up and we could unload them and everyone was happy and everyone could pick what they liked, which was something we couldn't really do at home, was we were all eating the same things, but we all had such different tastes that at dim sum it was like meatballs for Claire, shrimp dumplings for Alexa, chicken feet for Max if he's adventurous, or chicken feet for Claire, meatballs for Max. If they watch this, I need to get that right.
I feel like whoever eats the chicken feet wants to be known as the person that eats the chicken feet.
That totally is one of the best experiences I can imagine for kids, where it's just like you get to pick whatever you want, you know?
And you point and then they give it to you, which is not how restaurants work.
No, and it's not usually how it would work at home, or like it's not polite, really, in like the culture that you're probably in most of the time.
I would recommend dim sum to someone visiting downtown, and also just like bouncing around those neighborhoods that are so sidled up next to each other, like so close to my house. It's like you're in the biggest retailer area for like these giant designer stores, and then you go 2 blocks over and it's like cannoli avenue with just
Right.
like pizza places everywhere. And then across the street from that is like OTB places and dim sum houses and stuff and like teas and stuff. And then all these like street fair things going on. Like, the street fair that happens downtown is the Feast of San Gennaro, and that was a bittersweet street fair because it's the end of summer, but oh my God, the feast is here, and it's just we would all be like given like $10 to go and play games or do whatever we want with it, and so someone would try to win goldfish, and someone would just be like, I'm gonna spend it on food, and it was so fun. It's such a staple of New York City, and the smells are so familiar. Like even now, when usually in normal years when a street fair goes on, it's like, do we want to go to Gennaro this year just to mosey around, because the games aren't as interesting and they're just out for money, but you just want to be there to be in the crowd. So this year might be different, but like the Feast of San Gennaro was just like such a staple of school supply season and the last hurrah of summer, really.
Yeah. It's so nice to hear you talk about some of these things that they're these classic things that I, as a non-native New Yorker, am almost embarrassed to say that I enjoy, because it's almost touristy or cliche or something. The Feast of San Gennaro is it is so fun.
Yeah.
But I'm I almost don't feel like I can promote it, because then a native New Yorker will be like, well, that but you're a native New Yorker. And it's so nice to hear you say that is, because it really is fun.
Yeah, and as a kid, it's so exciting. It was like the carnival coming to town, literally.
Right.
And it was really funny after 9/11. It was hilarious. But there was this guy who was in the dunk tank, and he was the clown, and he would hurl horrible insults at you to egg you on, to get you to dunk him. And he was a 9/11 first responder. And you knew this, and you still wanted to dunk the shit out of this guy because he was just so mean.
Yeah.
And it was just this kind of thing that continued on at the feast. When it was, I don't know if it's still him, but I remember seeing him, the same guy, every year and being like, I know he's a hero, but fuck that guy.
That's amazing.
But that means he's a good performer too.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I could never dunk him. It was so far. It was a game for older, for the dads to do, to impress their wives or girlfriends or whatever. And as a tomboy kid, I'd be like, meh, and it airball.
Yeah.
That's great. Are there any other mass family activities you can think of that you guys would do?
I mean, it was hard, we don't even fit in cabs. It was difficult, to get into a cab when we were all really little and still lap sized. We would have to hide behind mailboxes and garbage cans. And then the trick was my mom would get the cab door open with the baby.
Yeah.
And then, the guy would help her get the stroller into the trunk, and it's okay, get in the car.
While
and,
he's
literally
helping.
sneaking into the cab. But in terms of mass family outings, it was there wasn't a lot that we could do all together. And as we got older, we all had our independent groups of friends, and we were very independent as a family in that way. But group outings were more like group stay-ins where we'd have family over, and we'd have big parties with friends and my parents' friends, and it we were the place that people would come to. So we in that sense created a destination, and I still look forward to that when they happen now in my adult life, because it's who can we pack in there?
Yeah.
Who can come? Everybody can come. In a lot of households, it's portions, who's coming, head count, place settings, and it's bring whoever, we'll figure it out, sit on the floor, there's more to go around. And that was really what we did as a family, was just be home because it could fit us all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've been to your family's house, and it's so nice. It's really I think the first time you invited us over there, I was like, oh, are you sure? I was imagining small SoHo apartment, and thinking
That was when
I don't know if I'm
company.
dressed well enough or something for this, and I don't know, her family's okay with this, and then and
always.
then they definitely were.
Yeah,
it was
especially
really nice
you guys
and
are
inviting.
tall. My mom really likes my tall friends.
Really?
I would bring short friends around in high school, which were most people, because not everyone is 5'10" in 9th grade. And my mom would say why are you with all these short girls? It's they're lovely. What? Don't be prejudiced against their height. It's you're only 5'5", mom, or 5'7", I should say. But at the time it was what's the big deal? But yeah, she'd love you guys.
Because you have the high ceilings, so she can show off like how tall the ceilings are in the
She
apartment.
has tall
maybe.
kids, like I get it, but like tone it down.
That's really funny.
What were some of the, because I seem to recall that there was a type of like a pizza bread or like a type of bread that you had at the party.
Bread.
The Bianca bread.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so tell us about that, but also like you're hosting so many events. Were there some like tricks up your sleeve you had when you were hosting that like, you know, get set up each time?
I mean, the bread is a big hack for the party because like there's this Bianca bread that you order. I think it's Thompson Street Bakery, and you need to order it a day in advance because it's literally like 8 feet long. But essentially, if you get that to your house in time for a party, as long as your people have like bread to eat, like they're not going to be that hungry or get that wasted.
Yeah.
I did have some parties in like high school and college that got out of hand because it's like when you have a party in a space like that and like everyone's just being so freewheeling, it's like friends can invite friends and then I'm seeing people in my house that I'm like, I don't know you.
Right.
To the point that one time I saw this girl that I knew from like one of my classes and I went up to her and I was like, hey, what are you doing here? She's like, oh my God, Alexa, what are you doing here? I was like, I live here. Who invited you? And it's like,
wow.
They would get that big sometimes. But tips and tricks are really just like have water always available, like any good party tip. And then anyone who comes in, if you have any rules, just tell them at the door. You know, like all you can do is like to communicate is like mention to everyone like there's one bathroom, so be brief and be clean. And because one time I had someone pass out in the bathroom and no one could get in, and I had to like I had to like do the knife in the door trick to get it open and like remove the person so other people could pee. So just like stuff like that. But yeah, provide enough food, provide enough water, even if the food is just bread. And if you, communicate your rules to your guests if there are any. Because like we're a shoes on household. There's not a lot of like formality. There's no dress code ever. Just be above 5'7".
You could have one of those rulers that they have before you get on a roller coaster.
This high to enter. Like honestly, my mom would love that. But I don't know. I was raised in like the people that I grew up around is like always bring something. Like even if it's not something to imbibe or eat, like bring something to someone's home. Like not that I'm asking for anything, but that's just those are party manners that I try to abide by.
Right. To this end, and I'm maybe misremembering the story a little bit, so we might be deviating slightly, but I do recall that Chris either came to your house or you were at a mutual party at one point.
Oh yeah. So when we were dating, we found this out, and I think because early in our courtship, I like, as a dating question, I asked like, you know, have you ever been in a fight? Because that's like a good question to ask someone you're dating, because you want to know what that was. And he was like, yeah, one time, not a fight really, but one time I did punch this kid in the face. And I was like, all right, let's hear that story. And he's telling me the story, and I was like, wait, was this on like 86th Street? So the story was that I was at a girlfriend's house, Armand Asante's daughter, as you do when you go to the fame school. And so we were at her mom's place, and she and her sister were gone, so it was an empty apartment, and she had a party. And like we were just smoking pot and like close friends and some friends of her boyfriends, but just like an empty apartment to smoke weed in with your friends.
Yeah.
And then like I was in the bedroom, but I heard a shuffle in the living room, and apparently like these smelly boys who nobody knew like crashed the party, and like my friend's boyfriend, who was like a bigger dude, like could play football, like asked them to leave and like then told them to leave, and they wouldn't, so he started like physically posturing for them to get out. And then I just remember Jason running into the bedroom like more angry than hurt and being like, one of those kids punched me. And he was so angry. And then on this date, I'm like, you punched Jason that night? You were the one that punched him? Because I never saw him. I never saw Supino this whole night. I was like, there's strangers here. I'm staying in the bedroom. I'm not getting involved in that. And he was the one that punched my friend's boyfriend in the face.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Were you impressed, or were you like
I
what?
was just shocked.
You were
I
just
was
shocked.
like, of course that's, because that was the thing when we met, was like, we're the same age, we went to schools in the same neighborhood, and we know a lot of the same friends. How have we never met?
Right.
Was like, that was the mystery surrounding when we met each other, was like, how have we not met each other?
That would have been the time you would have met if that punch hadn't happened.
So I kept trying to figure out, like, I'm sure at some point our paths have crossed, let's get down to it.
Right.
And that was just, the river running under our courtship was like, I'm sure I'm going to make a connection. And it was, did you ever get in a fight that like unearthed this connection?
Amazing.
That he punched Jason in the face at my friend Allie's house. that one time. Like, he was the smelly kid.
Right, which very much connects to what we talked about with him last week.
Oh, right, yeah.
He did explain being the smelly teen.
He's not embellishing that. Like, that was when Jason came running into the room, that was the description of those guys. I don't know who else was with him, but it was like, let's get these smelly strangers out of here.
He brought a knuckle sandwich to the party. That's that's not etiquette.
No,
that's just not.
He did it out of he kept saying like it was out of reflex because Jason was like threatening with a knife, but Jason wasn't gonna stab anyone. It was just get out of my house. You're not permitted here.
I mean, he is wielding a knife.
And Supino panicked and was like ah, and like just that's how it happened. So
when he was telling the story, was it an enjoyable story, or did he start getting anxious that he was going to feel judged, or like were you guys far enough along?
Oh no, we were just because I was interested. I was like, tell me. I'm not going to judge you. I'm asking for this information. Like, who would I be to be like, tell me? And like, ew, not that. Yeah. So, I was just floored. I was just like, you're that guy. We were one punch away from each other in high school.
It's probably good that you met when you met, though.
Oh, it's absolutely. I wouldn't want to meet that kid. Ew,
yeah.
Horrible.
Well, and then
but
you
no
always
judgment.
remember him as that kid. Yeah. How did you meet?
We met at a party downtown. We met on the Lower East Side.
Oh.
Yeah, I had been invited there by a mutual friend of ours. I had just gotten out of a serious relationship like 6 months prior, and so had he. Like, we were both kind of newly single. So we met at a party on the Lower East Side. I had just gotten off of one of my nanny gigs, so I'm arriving at midnight totally sober, which is like a really cool vibe to walk into always. So like I put on some lipstick and I'm like, I'm just one of the party people, like needing alcohol to catch up with everyone. And I see him and he looks so good. Like, he looks so good at this party, like compared with everybody else who was there. I was like, I'm gonna talk to this guy because he's like got eyeliner on and I love his shirt and I'm digging his vibe, so let me go up to him. So I go up to him and I'm like, excuse me, I love your makeup. Like, did you get ready like this for this party? Like, maybe he had somewhere else to be. And he was like, he was kind of already drunk, but he was like, this isn't makeup, these are my eyes. And I was like, cool. And I kind of just struck up this long conversation with him, assuming wrongly that he was gay, because of how impeccably he was dressed and like his good manners, and because I thought he had makeup on, all of which is wrong to assume about anybody, but I made that mistake so many times before and I just did it again. So we're dancing and I'm like really, really vibing with him, and he totally full-blown makes out with me like the night that we met.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, so mixed feelings. I'm like kind of pushing him off because I'm like, okay, so number one, surprise. Pleasant surprise, this is cool, I'm into it. But number two, let's chill, because there's like another guy at this party who I went on a bad date with and claimed I'm not ready to move on, because like I was out of a relationship. I told him the truth.
Yeah.
But I was into this guy, so I'm like, let's not let him know.
Right.
So Supino's like, which guy? And I'm like, the guy over there. And he's like, that guy? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, we're really good friends. I was just at his country house. And I'm like, what is happening? No. So that's how we met.
Wow.
Yeah, a week after that, I went to Colorado and like broke my phone and fell off the face of the earth for a while. And he was trying to get in touch with me and couldn't, because I was in a different state with no cell phone. So then he had been like asking my friends about me and like, what's her deal? And like, how separated from this other guy is she? And like getting the intel. And then one day, like weeks later, the same friend that invited me to the party was like, come to the park, we're playing Frisbee. And I was living in East Harlem, and I was like, oh, easy, I can look like shit and bike over there and just play Frisbee with my boys. And then Supino's there, dressed perfectly, looking awesome. And I roll up on my bike, like covered in sweat, like unshaved armpits, like, hey guys, oh, party makeout guy is here. And then we just hit it off and we started dating. Yeah, and then we just got married on May 28th during this, year. To have like a shining light for our families when like nothing good was happening. So we were like, we'll make something good happen.
Yeah.
So that's how we met.
That's an amazing story. I also love that like the time that you almost met, he was the smelly boy.
Right, and I was like the stoner.
And then you met in like this beautiful, you had this like great party night, and then your second like accidental meeting, you kind of showed up as like the smelly one.
Yeah, I definitely was.
Which he probably fully understood.
No, he didn't even care or notice. He was just like, I'm so happy to see you again. I was like, right, because I gave you my number and said reach out, and then ghosted you immediately because I broke my phone.
Yeah.
So. Love conquers all. If it's meant to be, it'll happen.
Yeah.
He tried to break his way into that party, and it didn't happen, so it happened at a different one.
It happened at the right time.
Yeah.
That's great. It's funny that you describe him as impeccably dressed twice, and when we did the introduction for him last week, I said he was an impeccable dresser, and he was wearing a shirt that you had purchased for him.
It's a mutual love of Prince.
Yeah.
But he is a very good dresser.
He
has
is.
a
He's
good
snappy.
sense of style.
I like it. My
Yes.
grandma likes that about him too. She's the
Aw.
first time she met him, she was like, very good outfit. Love his hair. I was like, right?
Well, he also kind of has an old world swarthiness to
He
him as well.
absolutely does.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like probably photos that my grandmother's used to seeing.
Right. That's a farm boy if I ever seen one.
Yeah, like would be handsome in her time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. And I mean, yeah, he really fits in with your family, right? I mean, every time he seems very caring for your family. I mean, he's generally a caring person.
Yeah,
but
he loves it because he has so much love to give and he loves his family so much, but it's just his mom and his brother. And now he has like 2 brothers-in-law and 3 sisters-in-law and like another grandma and another mom. And it's just, and then on top of that, it's all of my Latvian relatives who are like the most welcoming and boisterous and just like love it when the family grows. Like, I don't know what everyone has planned, but everyone loves how big our group is getting.
that's great.
Aw.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's been really nice. It's making lockdown like a breeze. This year is like easier with like living with someone like him.
Yeah, it's good to like who you're with right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like this is the
true
year.
test.
This is the
Yeah.
year that you're gonna know.
So you live in Astoria,
Mm-hmm.
and what were your expectations? What was your adventure level? I mean, obviously you had friends from everywhere, but living in Manhattan, what was your perception of Queens prior to moving in? How has it changed?
So I liked Queens to move to because I thought a lot hadn't changed, and I spent time in Astoria in high school because I was dating someone who lived out there. I was really familiar with like the park and the subways and just like the overall bodega-iness of the neighborhoods, like with the above ground trains. And I thought that it made sense for a cheaper place with more square footage, but I didn't think that Queens had changed that much, and the way that Queens has changed recently, like some small businesses I'm sure were being pushed out due to condominiums going up, but that's when buildings were like dilapidated and literally couldn't stay up, and the subways there have been so improved. Like there were lockdowns on the subways for a while where like entire stations were closed, and that really upended a lot of people's daily commutes, but like now that they're all open, and now that there's handy capable stations, it's like welcome to the 21st century. They're all clean, they're all well lit, and they all have Wi-Fi, and it's like they were already beautiful because they're above ground. So we can see the sunset and then be in this like pristine renovated station, and it's like, I feel like it's like the creme de la creme of Subway. It's definitely a different subway experience than the train that I took to middle school.
Right.
Like the underground C train. But yeah, I don't know. I like Queens a lot. It's like, it's a good place to be right now in my life. I feel like we want to explore other boroughs. Like neither of us has ever lived in Brooklyn.
Right.
And we feel like that's a borough that we missed the boat on when Williamsburg was really like coming up and into its own when we were in high school, when it had just kind of graduated from an unsafe place to like the cool but still kind of edgy area. It's different now. Where it's kind of only transplants, and for that reason I feel almost intimidated to go there because it's not a world of New Yorkers, which is what I'm used to and familiar with and therefore comfortable in. It's everyone that have sought out this place, that have made the decision and left their lives at home behind to come here and do them, and it's like, I have yet to do that anywhere. So coming into that neighborhood, it's a little overwhelming for me, but I feel like other pockets of Brooklyn we want to explore more and we want to maybe live in one day. Because right now it's only been Manhattan and Queens. But before Astoria and East Harlem, I loved that neighborhood a lot too. That's changed a lot, but also not very, at least since I moved out of it. And that's still like old New York, like Spanish Harlem with all of like the Mexican food places and the women who sell tamales on the corner, like 2 of those in my backpack on the way to class, and like they'd still be hot at lunchtime.
Oh, yum.
Like I miss those.
Yum.
I wanted to, like when we were considering our wedding in the park, I was like, what if we asked a tamale lady? And we all, because it would be, you know, like these little handheld individual servings that would tide everyone over, but we wouldn't have to pay a caterer. We could pay an individual woman. So it didn't come together, but like maybe at the reception.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Yeah, and it would be probably good business for her too.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely pay her for her time, but it's like, it's just the nostalgia of like living there and like loving that commute too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about where you might be interested in living after this. You know, the idea of living in a Brooklyn area like Williamsburg, when you're describing it, might not have the same, certainly it's not the same area, but your aims now as like a married young professional versus being an early 20s, you know, single person, you know, it changes, and then it becomes like, well, what is the intersection of Brooklyn that's like still has the novelty and like perhaps edginess, but certainly like something new for you, while
being quiet at night,
being quiet, or being whatever your, you know, aspirations are, you know. I guess I can't say harder. I guess it just gets different.
It just gets different.
We have to be more in touch with what we want, you know, which is like a challenge in itself. Like Queens makes sense because I was commuting to Midtown and it was a simple commute and easy, and I liked how quiet it was, but I liked how many bars and restaurants were there. Food in Queens, oh my God, amazing.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know how much longer it will be interesting. That's what we're talking about now, because we've been barely leaving it for months.
Right.
It's like, I wonder what else is out there.
Right. Well, I think, post-COVID New York, we just have no idea what that's going to look like and what the different neighborhoods are going to be like, and prices and all the things that we think about when moving. Yeah,
we've been talking about it earlier today, that Jesse saw an article suggesting that the prices in Manhattan at least have gone down from $3,600 to $3,200 average, and like that's not the floor. Yeah. I mean, you know, between now and whenever this, you know, is over, it's going to go down further.
And it's gone down to like a 5% empty
that's high for
rate,
Manhattan.
which is really high. Yeah.
Friends
I think
of mine just moved
usually
into a
around
place
2 or 3 or something.
that was totally discounted for them, just because it's like no one's moving to the city right now. It's like downtown, it has outdoor space, and it's less than $3,000. I'm like, how does that exist? But they got it. Like, now is a good time.
It's the moment. But it might be. It's like the stocks almost. It's like, is it the moment, or is it going further, or like what's gonna happen?
Yeah. And you know, we're very pleased with where we live. If you're listening, Letitia, we're very pleased with where we live.
Yeah, we love where we live.
Yeah, but it is interesting for people that are committed to being here. You know, it's like, there's might be some opportunities coming up here. You know, rather than the people that are like, well, I guess they said 400,000 people have left in the past few months. They don't know who's coming back, and Cuomo's like wants to plead with the billionaires to like come back, and you know, people at our tier are like, let's see what happens.
We're good, right?
Yeah.
Like, no one's asking for them.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Although, I don't know if this is interesting podcast information, but like, how does it work tax-wise? Like, if a billionaire is working in New York City, but living outside of New York City, are they paying New York City taxes? Because like, I pay state and city, right? But like, because that might be why he wants them to come back.
There could be all sorts of reasons. You got to imagine, if you're making that much money, you're probably hiring somebody that's making you keep as much of that as possible.
Right.
So it's probably more about him looking to get donations from people, or like the off like angel investment or things like that like keep the perception of wealth, but not like any structural actual advantages.
Right.
You know?
Like buying up fancy apartments that like remain empty. Right. And like that kind of thing where it's like, you know, almost full, the new tower, grab it now, but it's like, is anyone living there, or are they just bought to put someone in a lower tax bracket?
Right. Like, I don't support that part of it. But if they're,
I don't know. One day I'll learn how taxes work.
I don't know how it works. We'll have to have our accountant on to let us know how that works.
Yes.
I'll ask my grandma.
Your grandma's secretly accountant to billionaires.
Yeah.
Oh my God, wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really great place to put a peg in.
I have one more thing.
Ooh, I can't wait.
I wanted to end it because I know there's something that you've been doing a little bit of that I didn't know if you wanted to maybe plug on here or talk about a little bit. But when you were talking about your apartment and you moved to Queens, and I know that you decorated your apartment.
Yes.
And is that something that you have been maybe doing?
It is a little bit. Actually, some exciting news. So just to fill everyone in on what Jesse's talking about, is I earlier this year launched an Instagram account called Alexa Fix My Apartment, because friends of mine have been really interested in how I've decorated mine with a focus on sustainable pieces. So like 90% of the furniture in my house I either found on the street or bought on Craigslist or have secondhand. Enough people in New York City are rich and have amazing things that they're just getting rid of because it's literally easier than disposing of them properly. And no one in New York should it be buying any designer furniture new, because it's here already. So I've been working on creating content for that and kind of coming up with a business plan for it. But somebody reached out and I consulted with them last week. A stranger had me into their house during this time. Masks were on. I have antibodies, so I asked him, like, are you comfortable like with my mask on? Could I have it off? Or do you want yours off? Let me know. Masks came off eventually. I don't feel like I'm gonna get sick at this point again. But we went through his place and I told him that because it's the summer and I'm taking time off and I also have a full-time job, I would get him something in like before the end of the month, before September. So I'm still working on that, but it is something that I want to offer friends and loved ones, that when you move into a new apartment, and like the thing about New York is when you move into a new place, you have to have furniture specific to that space because it's so small. And with that comes a lot of waste and like money spent on new things. And like if you have someone help guide you and source cheaper pieces and then can maybe repurpose the ones that you're getting rid of with someone else, like there can be this amazing network. And frankly, like Stooping NYC has seen exponential growth, and I'm like kicking myself for not starting that Instagram, but like that on its own is showing New Yorkers that like it's here, it's all here. You don't have to go on Wayfair and pay for shipping and then get styrofoam mailed to you from another state, because that's bad for the planet, and it's already existing in New York. Like anyone watching this who's like, I'm dying to get my hands on like this one piece of furniture, type it into Craigslist every 2 days. And one day it's gonna be there. Like that's how I got my orange bar. That's how I got my custom sofa that when it was first built was $2,500 that I picked up for $400. Like just, it's out there. Like just, you need to put in the time to look for it, but it saves you thousands of dollars. And that's what I'm here to help people do.
You put in the time or you hire you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One more plug for the Instagram?
Alexa Fix My Apartment.
Alexa Fix My Apartment.
Apartment APT.
Nice. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen it. I'm going to go check it as soon as we're done
Oh,
with this.
thank you. Yeah, give me some likes. Like for like.
It's a blood pact. We're in this together.
Right? This is why we're here.
Well, thank you all so much for listening to the show. We have all of our, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, whatever you're not on right now, go to that other thing right now and then like it or something. Thanks so much. And until next time, when we're going uptown Manhattan to finish our first loop of the Manhattan area, take care.